So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. This is Monday Live, something we do every Monday at 3 o'clock to figure out where things are going for smart buildings. List of panelists are on mondaylive.org. Reminder that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. And I think by now everybody knows how to use the tools, the Zoom tools. And this slide deck is available on mondaylive.org with some of the links that we provide on it. This month, our focus is new market dynamics. Having talked about all sorts of things for the last few months, we kind of want to take a recap and sort of see what it is that we need to do in this industry. So the agenda for today, news and trends as normal, new market dynamics. We don't have a guest this week. We have set aside this week just for us to talk and talk about all of these changes that is going on in our industry. So before that, I'm gonna share some slides from the group here. Ken talking about May's issue, digital family and wireless, so we'll get an opportunity to chat about that, as well as ControlsCon, which was great. I attended that a little bit last week. John Petsey talking about REIT stocks and ESG, some more ESG stuff, so look forward to that. Roger talking about apprenticeship. This is in the UK, I'm assuming, yes, in the UK.
Yeah.
And Anna talking about a report from Memory that quotes Roger Woodward by the sounds of it. So this is a little bit interesting.
I'll come back to that.
All right. Big picture stuff. I continue to be worried about what's going on in India, especially this 617 variant. So need to keep an eye on that. Just as a reminder, we did put this up last week, mentioned this last week. We have this homework assignment for everybody trying to collate the building ratings that is all around us, apparently. So homework.mondaylive.org. If you head over there, you'll see a Google Docs into which there's already a dozen or so entries. Please add what you consider to be that we should be thinking about. And with that, I'm going to bring people back in and let's have a chat. Ken, you want to start?
Thank you, I will. It was a busy week with both Haystack and ControlCon. The ControlCon event, as the Haystack event, was an amazing event. The platforms for both events were extremely interesting. I found the platforms that the events were presented on and how that interfaced with the folks attending, the speakers, and the social media, I thought was brilliant on both of them. Quite a little different flavor on both of them, but ultimately they achieved the same thing. I think the other thing that did is it painted a picture for the industry going forward of how events will in fact evolve. Well, I think the hybrid was a direction that we were always heading, but you almost always need to have the ability to flip it into a virtual, because we never know exactly what is going to happen with variants or whatever. Or the other thing is just local rulings. We ran into that in the fact that all of a sudden they came up and said there can be no more than 25 people in the room at an event that was supposed to be a hybrid event. So quickly that had to be rescheduled. So the ability of keeping both the virtual stream and the real stream just becomes more and more important in the hosting of events. I was extremely pleased with the content. I'm not sure if we want to do it now or later. The MSI section, we had the how to successfully utilize master system integration. It brought up a whole bunch of neat issues. I was involved in that that track, and we had some powerful people speaking. And one of the major things that comes out of it is there's a big process to enable integration, to get people even thinking about the idea of actually hiring a master systems integrator, or how they might use one, or as it turns out, how they might become one, which seemed to be the general theme of all of our speakers. So anyway, I don't know what you want me to go into that later or now, or
Yeah,
what?
let's come back to that later, because that's one of the listed items, MSIs.
Okay, the only other thing I wanted to mention then before I hang up here is they offered me 10 free passes to the event. The other neat thing about virtual events, and of course we're finding this with Haystack as well, is that they never end because all of the information is now recorded. It's now there, and we have to kind of come up with a new vehicle of how we access it. The other thing we came up with was a common takeaway from all of the events is there's just so much change and so much learning that we all have to, we got to into continual education. We have to redefine ourselves. We probably got to spend 20% of our time learning, and just learning about, if we can't learn all the details, learning exactly where some of this information is. Anyway, what I did is I've lassoed 10 free accesses to ControlCon. If you read the posting on my my graphic there, you can see where to go to. It's events. Where is it?
Just on the link on your page.
Events at CochraneSupply.com. And if you actually say that, okay, I heard this on Monday Live, you get in there, it's the first 10, you can get a free access. They'll give you a promo code and you can register. I strongly recommend it. There's 16 hours of building automation information, and it's good stuff for sure.
That's great. Thank you, Ken. John.
Yeah, just two stories I thought was interesting as we've watched over the past year plus now with COVID. This news item that publicly traded REIT stocks have returned to pre-pandemic levels, even though, as we know, the buildings are not fully occupied yet. So I thought that was pretty interesting that, from, I guess, stock market point of view, people have faith that the built environment, people are going to be returning, and though that's a good place to put money. And of course, we've talked about ESG and sustainability. And so, there's more and more deadlines and requirements for organizations to report. This organization put together a nice little article on that. So I just thought I'd share that with people who were following along that theme of conversation around ESG.
Thank you. Roger.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to return to this. If you remember, one of our key subjects going back a little while now was about bringing new people into the industry and training them. And the BCIA, which is a controls trade association back in the 90s, all of the controls companies, including SIs, all got together and created one trade association because we felt there was too many. And this has been going on. They've been building all sorts of things. They've, the awards as well as, different areas of investigation. But one of the things they've been working on the last 4 years really is putting together a proper apprenticeship training scheme. And they've now finally released it. As you can see, it's got, covers the whole course content. It's got hardware, logic, field devices, networking, communication protocols, supervisor software, etc. And when you come out, it's a 3-year apprenticeship. And when you come out, you get a proper, qualification and certification. And obviously, it's something that if the US, I'm sure someone there wanted to actually latch on to this and look at whether it was something they could adopt, I can easily put you in touch with the BCIA. I was a chairman for 4 years of that, but about, really a good association, which is purely and only for the controls, for BEMS, read BAS in the States, but pretty much should be a really good in-depth training course that goes with the apprenticeship.
That's great. Thank you. Anno.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. There's an article by Memori that just came out last week, and it talked about the whole fact that smart building market is complex because it's unmanageable because we don't have the people. Which the article was interesting, Roger, because it referenced that BizRia article that you had referenced earlier in the week, right?
Yeah.
So it was funny that it resurfaced on Memori just this week. And it pointed to the original article. BizRia is the Building Services Research Information Association in UK, which is a good organisation to actually to follow too if you're not familiar with this. Some good content and material there. But the guy, the author, was basically going on about the complexity of the systems and the technologies that there are today, and that basically, the channel is part of the area where we're having problems delivering a lot of this complexity, which talks to the subject matter of what we're talking about this month, of course, is how do we get the supply. And then I just stole your comment, Roger. Supply chain needs to get smarter, not the technology. So it's a reference to a reference to a reference.
That's great. So anybody else have any thing they want to throw into the conversation before we get to our topic of the week? I take that as a no. So all right, so John is going to sort of frame this discussion about new market dynamics and things are changing. So I'm going to share a slide that we did put together. So over to you, John.
Okay, yeah. So I'll take the lead here, and we did our own internal homework, and I want to emphasize we really need the homework from the community on coming up with all those standards, because people around the world see a lot more than this group does. But we did our own internal homework around this topic of new dynamics, new business models, new things that are affecting the market. Hey, Anna, we didn't have complexity on there, but that's a good one. I happen to agree with that there's so much complexity to all of these great new capabilities that we could all take advantage of. But anyways, just some of the ones that ended up on the list from our internal discussions that we want to talk about today are, the role of consulting's doing now value-added work around data, right? And having ongoing services with customers, as a kind of a generalization, you used to view, consulting engineers were hired, they did a project, they delivered the paperwork, and then they're going off of that, right? And now many of them are moving into this world of continuous commissioning, monitor-based commissioning, M&V, and having a longer term, if not permanent, relationship with the building owner. And in an odd way, at one point, because we've seen this in our business, they were concerned about competing with system integrators, but they're not actually, because many system integrators really aren't doing this or aren't in a neutral position where they can do this across, right? You can't have the system integrator being the fox watching the hen house. So the consultants are seeing this emerging opportunity, and we see a number of them taking advantage of that. Then this conversation around distribution, and Tracy hopefully will jump in when we get through the list here. Some distributors moving up to providing true value-added services along with the products they sell. Others, I would say, trying to hold on to the commodity counter model only, right? And not being interested or capable of adding the value-added services. That's something I've certainly seen out there in the market. Related to that, the master system integrator, trend. And I'll relate to the first time I saw this came up around 2004. I'll leave names out of it. It was a major airport project, international, and the spec was written by one of the leading consulting engineering firms who were really into smart, intelligent buildings, control systems, whatever. And they designed a major spec structure that if you wanted to build bid on the top layer, the systems to true systems integration between the systems, you could not bid on anything underneath it, right? You couldn't bid the DDC system and the top layer of the software that's going to bridge all the systems together. Take your pick, right? That was the first time I ever saw that. I'm pretty sure it was '03 or '04. And I think we're seeing more and more of that, probably tied to the complexity, right? Um, Sensor systems, IoT devices that don't connect to the BAS, they bypass it completely, giving owners the promise of it's quicker and easier to just install this stuff and get your data, whether it's air quality sensors, it's electric meters. I think there's been a number of companies in the metering field that have come with this. And there's a lot of factors involved in this. So we'll hopefully explore a little bit of that. One of the things that I've seen talked about for the last 20 years almost, I'd say, at least 15, is, the untapped opportunity in small and medium-sized buildings, right? There hasn't been large penetration of what we consider building automation systems. We've seen manufacturers try to come up with lighter weight, lower cost BAS systems, right? One of the trends I've seen, it'd be interesting for others to comment, is that smart stats that connect to the internet and then can be managed for higher level intelligence at the cloud. It isn't a lower cost BAS, but it accomplishes a lot of those goals around a thermostat type device that has a little more local intelligence, but can be supervised over the internet. I've seen that those having a big impact in reaching the small and mid-sized buildings. And then, of course, the homework standard we've assigned to homework project we've assigned to everybody. All of these building rating standards that have a good value, they target a needed area, but how many are there? What are they all addressing? How do owners and the systems integrators who have to help them achieve them, how do they get their head around all of these things, and what does it take to participate? And then just the digital marketplace, right, for new ways of buying product. I wanted to add one more bullet that I didn't get to in time, but it was remiss not to be in there, which is the IT players entering or supposedly entering the IoT and smart building market, right? The Googles and Microsofts, the Amazons and similar, that have messaging around what they can and will do in our market, and how far are they getting, how much impact are they having, right? So those are the big ones we can talk about, and hopefully somebody will pick up on their favorite and we'll get a discussion going.
I was going to say, John, I'll pick up on 1 and 3, because just last night I was invited to sit in on a tender briefing session in Singapore, which was Monday morning their time, of course, where large government organization was asking for a consultant. It was an RFP for consultancy for smart building technologies for all their facilities, and they had some 30 facilities and stuff. A couple of things jumped out at me that kind of echoed a lot of stuff that you said here. One was that they had asked, the RFP was specifically for consultants in the space to write a specification for their requirements. It was a 4-month deal, et cetera, et cetera. When I came on the session, 36 people were on the session. This is for Singapore, right? It's not a big place. And, I can tell you right now, there aren't 36 people I'm aware of who could do consultancy in the space in the Singapore market. And so I did some digging on it. And the interesting thing was that there were a lot of the 36, probably a good half of them were what I would class as MSIs or want to be MSIs, right? Who are thinking like, okay, I'm getting into the consultancy space.
Oh, they're going the other way.
They're going the other way, right? There's a dearth of consultants in the space. And then I did some more digging this morning, and I found out from the agency themselves that they had put out an initial email request to consultants, and they had such a poor showing of people who actually turned up that they increased it to MSIs and SIs who wanted to play in the consultancy space, which is really interesting. And then to your other point, the very first question anybody asked was, so if I bid on this, can I bid on the implementation? And they said, no, absolutely not. You had to pick and choose. So that's still quite strong.
Wow.
So that was funny, because it literally echoed most of the points you just mentioned in a tender briefing just yesterday.
That's great. See, I didn't make it up.
You didn't make it up. And it was complex. And I tell you, the nature of the beast was complex. They had large facilities, some semi-industrial, all the way down to small facilities. You know, and he echoed some of the points that you made about some of the small facilities have no BAS, but they were looking to cloud solution, you know, for the BAS part for the small facilities. So
Cool.
That
you
whole
should have said
idea,
it. You should have said it.
the whole idea of MSIs being separate and locked out from some of the lower level parts of the project, that isn't new, John. You're right. We talked about that when we were doing the Landmark tours back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, actually. And there are quite a few projects that went with that model, that either 3 or sometimes 4-tier kind of model, where starting at, you know, MSI and integrator, and then equipment vendor and supplier. And then some of the projects that we saw even went to a 4th level, where it was more on the devices, the sensors and valves and things like that. So it is something that I certainly have seen and been aware of and participated in at different levels, actually, over the years. And that's one of the interesting things about your list. On any given day, you know, we might behave as a distributor or an MSI or a vendor or a consultant, or I think it's kind of hard in this business to not have your fingers in a little bit of several different roles in that kind of stack.
Well, that's where we get to the second bullet, you know, distribution companies having to make the decision to be able to do that or not, right? Obviously you must have had to change your business to be able to respond to those opportunities, right? And, you know, a generalization back some period of time ago, you know, a distributor couldn't touch any project work, or they're competing with the people who come and buy the stuff from them. That's a fuzzy line. That is not, you know, I mean, if you go out and bid directly against the guy who's rolling his truck up to buy the stuff, but that's not what this is about, right? It's providing services that maybe you are best to provide because you understand something about the technology you sell, and the system integrator doesn't, even though they have the responsibility to install it and commission. They need the support from you, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tracy. Go ahead.
I say it's funny because we have kind of played on both sides of that fear. Are we competing with our customers? And on the other side, no, we need, you know, we're the ones that know best to do this kind of thing, because we see this through so many different customers and vendors, and, you know, the view that you have is a little bit different. So that's been an ongoing thing. And I think the need to do more, at least I can speak from my standpoint, has come out of, you know, evolutionary requirements, evolve or die, right? A lot of distribution has become very commoditized. You know, back when we started, there were no e-commerce sites to buy controls, right? We were one, I think maybe even one of the first ones to put up an e-commerce site.
We talked about that.
Yeah, and then, you know, the ability to ship very fast and very accurately and very inexpensively, that's taken away another kind of core value of a distributor who carries inventory, right? So there are just these things over the years that have kind of chipped away at some of the core value propositions from a distribution standpoint, that have forced everyone that had that as part of their business model to, you know, rethink or evolve to be more on the consultant side and more on the MSI side over the years.
Or more, go the other direction and be a total digital marketplace, right? Not all of them, from my experience, are actually embracing offering value-added services, but they're going to have to do something else to adapt. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. You gotta evolve your model a little bit. And I don't know that there's a right or a wrong direction or answer to that either, by the way. It's whatever you're most comfortable with from a business model standpoint, or technology or experience or knowledge. So
That's
So
something
if
we've
we-
been talking about recently, where it's kind of, you know, what we've been traditionally been doing is breaking the market down. So things tend to happen by osmosis in our industry, you know, suddenly happen slowly and molds into something differently, and kind of seeing the supervisor morphing off of sight into maybe the maintenance management package, and so therefore there are routes for the metering to go direct because it's not needed to be consolidated as supervisor, and you know, the development of the MSI role. So maybe we're seeing a bit of a breakdown because it's beginning to get more kind of complex from edge to cloud services, that different people are beginning to fill those different roles.
Well, I kind of look at it a little similar, but a little different. So if we kind of look at some of these topics, master system, the role of, you know, the increase in master system integrators, consultants, the change in distribution model or whatever, it's, look at it as it's a different way of purchasing. And one particular area that I see that is not on our list, but I don't know if it should be, is the new role of the owner operator and how they have changed and are changing. So for example, they've got new patterns, new processes, new people who are now involved in this. It's not always about issuing out an RFI, an RFP, get the bidders and go through that process. They're more informed, they're better educated, they're more in control and directing what really is going to happen or not happen. And I'm seeing a lot of this is that they're acting almost like a general contractor would. They're running the ship, they're running the show, and they are dictating and organizing the way they want to do this. And as an example, and this kind of floored me the other day, is I got a call from a headhunter, a recruiter, great, you know, and he was looking for a end user role as the chief smart building officer. And so what is that role? Okay, this role is in charge of making this particular company, who had a portfolio around 800 buildings, all those buildings smart, connected, you know, what we do as an industry. So I look at that, you know, adding on to what I just said. And then something we've talked about too is how this role of the end user is changing. We've already talked about the new breed of the facility manager and what that takes for that particular role now. It's just not the old days. And finally, I'll just end with this, is that our space is, and I'll echo what John said, is it just the IT folks who are kind of looking at this space? I say no, not just them. There's others that are looking, and I know of 2 global manufacturers who are sort of related to this space, but really are not, are looking at trying to get into this space globally. So that's how I view, you know, what some of the new market dynamics of what's occurring.
Okay, I'd like to jump in here because Mark just did a great introduction to what I wanted to talk about. And at ControlCon, we had a session called the How to Successfully Utilize Master System Integrators. And what has happened there is these sophisticated owners have understood that we're floundering, and they basically have taken it into their own hands to organize us and organize. They understand the value of a master systems integrator, but they understand that there's problems as to, because you may want to have several of them, the problems of them being wearing several hats. And they basically have jumped into that. And the discussion we had was amazing. We had Robert Reel from CBRE talking about a 3,000 building project they pulled together. We had Sabine Lamb from Google, and Donnie Walker from Newcomb and Boyd, and Bobby Tincher with University of Kentucky. And basically they had grown up inside and come at it the other way. They'd come across the floor by doing the IT side of it, and then trying to figure out what the heck the value is in a master systems integrator. And so it's kind of an interesting approach, but it builds a lot on what Mark was just saying.
Ken, what did they conclude? What were the major conclusions of that?
They seem to have a very successful integration in my mind. They have a pattern for moving forward. They've made it scalable. In all, they're lucky enough that every one of them is big enough that they can actually do that. They can actually have people. We actually talked a lot about how do they train their people? And some of the universities, University of Kentucky and Google both had programs in place to actually train the people in this evolving trade. The other thing that came to my mind.
So Mesa, sorry to interrupt, but are you saying that because I'm a little familiar with the University of Kentucky, but not so much with Google. Are you saying that they've concluded that they need to be their own MSI?
They are.
That's what you're saying.
No, well, not necessarily. They will actually, they will drive the MSIs. They realize the value of an MSI.
Okay, so they're still hiring an MSI, but they're using the MSI to do what we talked about.
What they want done. They basically
Right, okay.
give the MSI good instruction. And I think that's the problem we have is we don't have a sophisticated enough owner in most places to actually understand the value or understand the value of anybody's services on this screen because it's complex. And so you have to have a person that has an incredible understanding. And all of them had come from a computing science background and a data base, and then they've kind of fallen into our industry and then saw the value of doing that. So it was an interesting twist. Anto, you said you looked in on it. What was your thoughts? Sorry.
What about the basic concept of defining what an MSI is? You know, John alluded when he introduced it that the MSI should not be selling any of the subsystems. They should only be focused on integration. Was there some good conversation around defining the role of the MSI? Because I think the term gets used very loosely now.
Yes.
I think if you put the pieces together, it's kind of interesting that can you put it that way, that it's, and you're right, that was what came out of Friday's conversation, that some owners are realizing what should be done with the system and don't know how to make it happen. Can't go directly to system integrators, traditional system integrators or contractors or vendors. So they've effectively said, okay, so there has to be an interface, and that interface is the MSI.
Right.
Kind of the way they're thinking about it. So I think that's an interesting way of sort of reframing the MSI. That's a little bit different from what John was saying, which is kind of from the supply side. So that's quite interesting in my view.
The other one I found interesting was Donnie Walker's presentation. He's with Newcomb and Boyd, and I tried to float the idea of there was maybe a need for a professional systems integrator who would be above the master systems integrator. And he very quickly defended that and said that he saw this as just simply an extension of what he needed to be a leading mechanical consultant because data and automation are integral parts of what it is he was doing. And so therefore he had to have a whole division within his consulting company that knew what the heck they were doing. And I thought, wow, that is great words. And I think that's what John was talking about in his definition of that. And I think that is more of a trend. I'm seeing that with our company, SES is basically keeps bumping into that too, is do you become the master systems integrator or do you hire the master systems integrator? The fact that you're having that discussion with yourself is a good discussion. And I think then you have to start talking to owners that are having that same discussion. So I think the problem we're fighting with, everybody's fighting with. The consultants are fighting with it. The building owners are fighting with it. But what came out of this session was some clear direction as to how people were in fact dealing with it. And it does require a better definition of what is a master systems integrator. The other thing that was quickly identified is that on a very successful project, you would have several master systems integrators. Somebody may be doing security, somebody may be doing location services, somebody may be doing HVAC, all different strains that need to all come together, and then they all come into the same room and try and figure out the best way of doing that. But you're quite
I
right.
remember listening to that particular comment, and I was a little bit confused. I thought the whole idea of a master system integrator is that there is a master that integrates everything. So having multiple kind of seems counterintuitive.
I think exactly because it came out of our industry, the concept of a master systems integrator, it was a master systems integrator for our industry. The problem is buildings are much bigger and getting much bigger every day than our industry. And so location services is huge to these people. Every one of them had, Newcomb Boyd broke that out as a separate, they ran separate systems. They were recommending that be a separate system. That has nothing to do with the HVAC. We can share data, but it's a completely, what they call it, mobile services. Mobile services is a whole engineering division. I strongly recommend if you that you basically sign up and download some of these PowerPoints and stuff. There's some really good stuff, some stuff I had never seen.
Yeah, we get a lot of the MSI role is kind of the role that's the real estate guys, the REITs are the ones that are actually, because they're getting smarter, they're demanding that, they've got BIM connected to the BA, with the BAS data, which is connected to the maintenance management, maybe even the HR system, because they want details about the security system and who can go where. And the MSI role is the guy or the person that's kind of protecting the REIT to make sure he gets what he wants from all the different people who are providing the solution. So they're kind of acting as the middle people between the OT and the IT systems, and then serving up the data. Okay, if people for space management or energy or whatever else want to get out of the data, that's a different story. They kind of are the enabler for those roles and the information, but just making sure that it can happen, because if it's just left to the traditional routes, you just get all the different siloed packages being offered and nobody pulling it all together. But it's being driven by the REITs themselves here.
One thing that rolled out of the sessions and basically the whole ControlCon event was the need for MSI enablers. That we need. It's not an easy task. You can tell an owner you should hire an MSI, and if his understanding of an MSI is the same as Anto's, that this is the master systems integrator, he'll hire it and he'll get a reasonably working HVAC system if that's a person's orientation, but he may completely miss the telecommunications F5 or G5 integration and all of those other aspects of it. So I think we almost need an MSI architect to basically pull together all of these strains and try and make sense of them for the sophisticated owner. So what we are is we're seeing examples of it in the large campuses like Google and the universities. The University of Kentucky is huge. I had no idea it was that big of a university. Wow.
Ken, we may have touched on this a little bit, but if this change is occurring, if owners are taking different roles, more active roles, that would lead me to believe they think, or there's some need not being satisfied somewhere, somehow in there.
Absolutely.
So they're getting involved to satisfy that need and expecting a different outcome, I would say. Is that
Tracy, is it not being satisfied, or is it more, I control my outcomes. I want these 20 business outcomes, whatever they are. Mm-hmm. And the only way I know I'm going to get them if I control them.
Are they different outcomes than what they've always had?
I think today, building owner, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, without I doubt there are different
What,
outcomes.
can you identify some of what that might look like?
Well, let's just take, for example, and we used to talk about operating efficiency and, better performing buildings. All right. We rarely talked about the whole occupancy and the safety issue and the wellness. That is front and center now. In other words, again, that's been driven by COVID for the most part, let's face it. There's other things, identified specific KPIs, whatever they may be. So I think, they're answering the building owner now in the more sophisticated, what we've talked about, they're answering to a board, just like I would with, what I do or what people on the call do, et cetera. So, I just think the world is changing. I think we all agree there. And it's just a matter of what direction we're going, we're going to end up.
Let me ask the group here, because I think to answer your point, Tracy, in the last 20 years, the level of sophistication and complexity of building controls has just continued to accelerate. So if I'm an owner, I gotta be feeling like I'm losing control, because I've got, whether it's, put some context around this. One of the major customers that I'm aware of, who recently built a major facility in New York City, has 20 different types of OT systems. Okay.
I mean, from different manufacturers?
Different manufacturers doing 20 different things. So think about that.
Not
So
just
they had an MSI, and the MSI did what you guys have alluded to in terms of just providing the integration. So when integration gets to that level of complexity, you've got to do something, right? So now that, to me, that's one of the trends that I believe is driving the need for an MSI, and then because just the amount of stuff that's being asked, everything's digitizing everything.
I'm wondering if MSI is a bit of a misnomer, and what it really is a master information integrator. That's the focus.
That's not us. But,
I think it was
maybe it
Chad
is,
on
but
the chat
that's not
said
us.
data integrator,
That data information, because that's what I think maybe what's changing is that the owners are suddenly realizing that there is a lot of data and it is not being used, and they, from other aspects of their lives, understand that data can have a lot of value, and that's kind of what's driving it.
In this session, it was led by women, which was, hooray, there we go, a victory, and powerful women, and they all came from a data scientist background. That was their computing data science, their basic backgrounds. They came to this, it was just, to them, we're just another problem that has, another data problem that has to be solved. And they're finding useful that we have master systems integrators who talk funny to all of these 20 systems and can actually understand what that means. I don't want to deal with that as a data scientist. I want you to take all of that mess and turn it into data that I can use. And I want to use that data the way I want to use it. I don't want to use it the way you think I should use it. And every one of them has grown from the same root of actually having an application where they took on the university or in their campus to solve a problem. And then they started building on that. And then they started learning backwards. Oh, you guys are actually, you actually have some useful things. The other thing you've done is you've taken all of those 20 systems of the past that were on 20 different networks, and you've actually accepted that an IP network is where you want to be, or wireless, either which one, they don't care. At least it's a definable network and data we can understand. So I think that's a lot of what the movement is going on right now. That's the gist I got out of the session. So a lot of good information.
Ken, what you just said, though, I think actually leads to a potential problem, right? While they look at it from the data point of view and, why can't it all conform to their way, their view of how data should be presented? That can kind of hide the fact that there's a lot of technical engineering expertise to program these systems to do the right thing. And I think that has been a problem in our industry, is that the skill sets of making sure the control sequences are right, aren't being considered for their level of importance. Everybody just wants to focus on the data and the data science and all of these things. It's both. And that would be, if that was carried to the extreme, that would be equally a bigger problem and lead to as many non-well-functioning buildings. We can't forget that there is equivalent intellectual knowledge in how to control these complex equipment systems in buildings.
I would have asked that.
I would agree
question
with
back.
John that it's really all about the physics, not about the data science.
Right.
We're basically running physical world analytics systems. So having models of actually what's going on is more important. A lot of people in data science have collected data and used statistical techniques to boil it down without having an underlying model of what the systems are. And I'm with John on John's side of this, that it's those underlying models that add the value to what we do.
But from the owner's perspective, they care about what we do because they expect us to do it right. But they're not focused on that. They're focused on some other sort of set of value proposition objectives for which they need data.
Right. Well, that was my point, is the focus has shifted over to the new shiny object. Well, that's great. We need the new shiny object. We can't forget the old one, right?
Yeah, so
Because that's what
John,
makes their building run right. And I see this trend in some of the conversations we have, with owners,
So John, with regard to the definition of an MSI, do you think that should be part of the scope of responsibility of the MSI, is to ensure that or should that be at the system integration level only?
I think that should be at the system integration level, because if
Okay.
you get an MSI who's got the IT skills necessary to satisfy the data scientists and the data platforms and all that, they probably don't know how to optimize a chiller plant. I'm just going to take a bet on that.
Hey, I was intrigued by your fourth bullet about the stats, and I think about, this is making me think about things. So what I filled in the blank there, correct me, like a Splunk would fall in that category, a Tableau, SAS.
No, I wouldn't say so. Those are platforms you can do stuff with, but they're not designed to do supervisory control of HVAC systems. Somebody could build an application on Splunk. But by itself, it doesn't do anything, right?
So, but that fourth bullet, so when I saw stats, I was thinking, oh, statistics, like stats.
Thermostats.
Stats. Oh, thermostats. Oh, okay. Completely wrong. Read it wrong.
Yeah,
but
we
it
missed
did
the
make
T
me
there. We need to add the T back in there.
I think Residio.
It did make me think about if anybody, he left McKinney Systems and went to Splunk, and he would talk at some of our conferences, and he just left Splunk. And I'm Brian. It's another Brian Gilmore.
Yeah.
And I, some of these guys who was really smart, when at McKinney's, he had dealt with Air Force bases, he understood, and he said, what can I do with Splunk?
Mm-hmm.
Being just a data science thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I worked with Splunk when I was only doing cybersecurity stuff. You can recognize data streams, where Splunk came out of, like security, social security numbers and personal identification numbers. That I understood what it could do, but somebody like Brian Gilmore, I think they took it as far as they could, and he just left.
So if we're right that the expectation of MSIs from owners is to work with the data, to gather and work with the data and get some actionable information out of that, then the 2 points that we haven't discussed, the sensor systems that bypass BAS, and then the stats thing, those are kind of ideal for MSIs because they just deliver data, right? The complexity has been reduced. IoT systems typically are very focused on something, so the complexity has been reduced, and they just deliver data. So isn't that?
Yeah, but the challenge there, Anto, and we literally had a discussion with another end user last night as well. The challenge there is that the plethora of IoT sensor solutions out there, non-standard protocols, non-standard APIs. You know, for a software guy, sure, can do, you know, go read a you know, an IP protocol, write a driver, sure. But then to say to the MSI, well, okay, you got to use X, Y, Z IoT solutions, and oh, okay, what's the protocol? Oh, self-invented. You know, you go talk to the guy and find out. So now they've become software developers, right to right. So how do they? So it's a good, easy answer because they divide. They have data, but they are totally non-standard in any way that they implement their solutions.
Listening to this, oh, sorry, Roger.
You go ahead, Tracy.
I'm listening to all this, and it's kind of the same age-old argument here. And you know, data is one thing, but that's only half the thing. We need a closed loop environment or system, right? We got to do something with that data, and to do something with that data, you need to have the knowledge and technology and or the control aspect connected to the data somewhere. But on the business side of things, you know, I keep coming back to this. Sounds like owners who don't want to get locked into a proprietary solution again. And so they're inviting and welcoming disparate systems out there, but now they're realizing when you do that, you've got things all over the place. So we need to pull it all back together. Is that what you guys are experiencing or talking about here potentially?
Yeah, because I think that you know, the 20 systems that Steve was saying, and then you get the sensor systems that just add in another pile onto the 20 because they just do. And the MSI is kind of saying, okay, I got to make them all standard solutions, but on top of that, he's then pulling that together so that there's an integration at the top level because the customer is actually asking, saying, but I want my BIM solution to integrate with those 20 systems. And oh, by the way, the maintenance management package, an alarm from any one of those to automatically generate a works order that goes through and delivers back to the chiller guy to do the servicing or whatever. And then he wants to pull it in with the security system. So they're kind of pulling those systems together, both at the top and the bottom.
To me, that actually goes to the last bullet on the list, ignoring the IT players one that John added, which is the digital marketplace. And I put that suggestion in, and my thinking of that is that it's kind of the thing that makes all of these different sort of data layers and different roles be able to work with each other. Maybe a marketplace is the wrong word for it, although there is a marketplace component. It's just that there are lots of different things going on here, and the needs of the various people are various stakeholders are pretty clear. But you need something to make it all work. And it's not the specific technologies, it's not the protocols. You're shaking your head, Tracy.
No, I'm agreeing with you though, because I think none of this is going to work until everybody in the chain is getting value out of it, including the vendors or the creators of the data or the manipulators of the data. There has to be a marketplace there. There has to be a way for all of us involved, top to bottom, to monetize the knowledge, the value that we're adding here. And until that happens, I think we're going to live this, what we're talking about for a long time, right? Ultimately, when it's clear how to make money at something or how to save money, and I'm talking from owner all the way to, you know, sensor vendor, it won't work, right? There has to be a way for everybody to get that value, either through savings or revenue or something.
Both from the supply side and from the demand side. That's all going to work, and that's what a marketplace is.
I think the problem is we always just talk on this screen, and the world is bigger than this screen, and our industry is a piece of the industry. We all know what we have to do in our industry. But the problem is like on Donnie Walker's slide, the mobile experience was much bigger than the temperature control. The people they will walk out of the building if they haven't got cell phone connection or they don't have Wi-Fi in the building, but they will not walk out if it's too hot, not for a while anyway. Wow. So we've always kind of thought that we're the most important people in the building, and that's no longer true. the relationship, the electronic relationship with the building is now become a bigger thing than us, and we're a part of it. And how we interface with that, how we interface with the mobile experience, I think is cardinal. And all of the new products that were introduced at the show, they all reached out to the Wi-Fi and G5 and system
definitely
all that
reaching
stuff is now part of the controllers you can buy. So we're coming at this both from the top and the bottom. So that's going to be another problem, is you're trying to organize the top of this. We've got these systems at the bottom reaching out to the internet. So there's a lot of things going on.
The human part of that comment is really important, Ken, too. And I'll give you a perfect example today. We had a tenant has one of our systems in there, and the UI had an issue. And so they couldn't change their temperature. They were getting cold. And they send out an email with a screen capture to a bunch of people. And I responded, can you go to the thermostat and change the button? And they hadn't even thought about that. It used to be the other way around. We couldn't get people to look at their UI. They wanted to go to the thermostat. And now these guys are all upset and copying everybody and hadn't thought about going to the wall and just changing the temperature.
But that's not acceptable to them. Going to the wall is not
they were
acceptable.
legitimately pissed off.
Yeah.
They were
Get
mad.
that thermostat out of here. I do not want a thermostat that's not Wi-Fi enabled.
Yep.
And that's what in everybody's product, that they introduced, every one of them had Wi-Fi capabilities.
Yeah.
I had a similar personal experience over the weekend where I was trying to turn the volume down of the music on my Spotify, and my wife just went over to the thing and just turned it down.
Yeah, I've gotten caught on that one a few times.
I just go to the clap on, clap off. I still use that.
So I want to circle back to, back to my opening points about this, the complexity of the stuff. The problem is it's become the stuff that we do have become orders of magnitude more complex. And not only that, the solutions, the number of people who think they've got the answers and the solutions are also so much more complex, right? And we haven't kept up in our space as far as people who know how to do that. Look at this, look at the breadth of stuff that we talked about, from Wi-Fi to data to cyber to integration to protocols to, just the relationships. I long for the days when it was just pneumatic, man. I used to, debugging a pneumatic system was ideal. You'd come in on a Sunday when it was quiet, you'd put your head up in the ceiling space and you'd hear the leak. It was awesome. But the complexity has changed the equation.
Universally integratable too.
Yes, they were. Everybody's pneumatic worked with anybody else's.
All right, so
Security is
we're
a great complexity in order of magnitude as well.
it looks like we have to simplify things, so we're past the top of the hour. Anybody want to wrap this up?
It's unwrappable.
It's unwrappable.
John,
The cat's out of the bag.
I agree.
No, that was good.
On that, I
discussion.
agree. It's unwrappable.
All right.
it's
Okay.
interesting though that we're hearing a lot of the same debates and arguments and problems. The complexity has just gotten, infinitely wider to this whole thing. And we all need to figure out a way to kind of wrangle it back in and get everybody going in the same direction, it feels like.
It's because we're trying to deliver right from the edge all the way through to various cloud services and new cloud services too.
There is one really positive point to all this discussion though, as I listen to everybody today, and that is the owners are getting involved and we've wanted their attention forever, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good thing potentially for us.
Yep, I agree.
All right.
100%.
So we'll wrap up on that
Great.
positive note, and this has been great. We'll put the video of this up by tomorrow morning for anybody that wants to watch it again or others that want to watch it, and we'll be back next week to continue this focus on new market dynamics. So specifics TBD. Have a great week, everybody. Bye bye.
Guys.
Bye.
See y'all.
Okay.
Cheers.